This is my new baby. She weighs 2 pounds, 3 ounces, and is filled with sausage, egg, cheese, potatoes, avocado, and is even wrapped in a homemade flour tortilla. And I'm gonna show you how to make your own burrito, baby, right at home. We'll begin by making homemade flour tortillas. First, we'll add some flour to a large bowl. Then I'll add in a generous amount of salt, as well as some pork lard. This is the classic way to make flour tortillas, but if you want to substitute it with shortening or butter, you certainly can. You can also just skip this step entirely though and buy pre-made tortillas, but these are going to taste a lot better. Before getting my hands in there, I'll start by mixing to break up some of that fat. And after about a minute, the mixture is going to start to look pretty clumpy like this. Then, before adding any water, I'm going to get in there with my hands and start squeezing everything together. The goal here is to press that flour and pork fat together as hard as you possibly can. It's almost kind of a push and squeeze motion at the same time. You can also pick it up between your hands and rub it really hard between your fingers like this. And what you're ultimately going for is a very light, wet sand texture. You'll know you're ready to start mixing in your water once you can grab any part of this flour mixture, and when you squeeze it, it holds together like this. But the second I squeeze this in any way, it's gonna crumble back into that wet sand. At this stage now, I'll start adding in my water, but I'm not gonna do all of it at once. It's always easy to add a little bit more, but not so easy to take out. And now the dough comes together fast. And the reason I haven't been worried about anything spilling on my cutting board is that I can just sweep it all up with my dough once I take it out of the bowl. The final step is to knead your dough for several minutes, and don't expect it to look perfectly smooth at the end. All you're looking for is that it's well mixed and has a fully consistent texture throughout. When your dough looks something like this, you're ready to move on. Grab a knife or a bench scraper and cut your dough into 4 even pieces. If you really want to, you can pull out the scale, but it's breakfast and I'm hungry and I'm not about to pull the scale out. Even though I definitely didn't just cut them into 4 even pieces. Now, take 1 piece at a time and then make a loose claw with your hand like this to spin your dough into a nice compact circle. Perfect. This can be a bit of a tricky move to learn in the kitchen, but the key is that you have a little bit of the bottom of the dough sticking to your work surface. And that little bit of grip is what allows you to spin it around and create that tension to form it into a ball. Yeah, these are definitely not the same size, but that's okay. Once they're all shaped into a ball, grab a plastic bag or some plastic wrap and toss them in to let them rest. They need to relax a little bit before we roll them out to cook them. Good night. Let's move on to our home fries. When I think about a breakfast burrito, I think about one that has lots of texture. And these home fries are gonna provide both fluff and crisp. I'll start by slicing my tomatoes. They're not tomatoes. It's breakfast, I'm tired. I'll start by slicing my potatoes into nice little cubes. You can cut yours bigger or smaller if you want, but I'm going for something like this. I want them big enough that they have that space inside to have that nice fluffy texture, but also small enough that they fit inside my burrito. Once they're all chopped up, I'll transfer my potatoes to a small pot, and then I'll cover them with cold water, enough to cover about 1 inch above the potatoes. And then I'll add in a pinch of baking soda, as well as a little salt. Quick little stir so none of these are sticking together. Once this comes up to a boil, I'll turn this to a simmer and let it cook for about 6 to 8 minutes or until fork tender while we go to start working on our meats. First, bacon. Now, call me crazy, but I'm not a fan of bacon in burritos because I feel like it always gets so soggy. Even if you do put it in there when it's still crispy, it just seems to end up as the wrong texture. So instead, I'm gonna cook some bacon on the side and use sausage for the inside of our burrito. This can be our little snack on the side. When I cook my bacon, I also like to add a little pizzazz to it. I often top it off with a little bit of lemon juice, and that acidity is gonna cut down on the fat in the bacon, and then a little bit of fresh cracked black pepper. And you end up with this really well-balanced bacon. So this is just gonna cook in the background while we do everything else. By now, our potatoes should be done. Let me get a fork tender, definitely. So now that these are done, I'll bring them to the sink, give them a quick strain and drain off that water, and then back into your pot over medium-low. You should use the same pot. The only reason I'm using a different one is because I was trying to show you the visual in that beautiful glass one before. What you'll want to do now is cook these for just 1 to 2 minutes. Don't touch them too much, but shake them around every so often, and know that the goal here is to get the outsides of the potatoes a little bit rough and chalky like this, which will give them a nicer crust and a better texture for when we go to eat them later. Once your potatoes look like this, you can cut the heat and move them off to the side to get ready to fry. To get them nice and crispy, we're not going to deep fry our potatoes. We're gonna shallow fry. You'll want enough oil where it's gonna cover the potatoes about halfway up when you put them in. So I'm now gonna add in about half my potatoes, or as many as I can fit without overcrowding my pan. If you put too many, the potatoes are gonna steam themselves and not actually brown. So you wanna leave nice gaps of space between all your potatoes so that there's ample room for that oil to move around. And once they're in the pan, I'm not gonna touch the potatoes. Instead, I'm just gonna swirl them around like this to move them around. While those finish getting nice and crispy, I'm gonna make my spice blend. I've got a little smoked paprika, then some hot paprika, then a little garlic powder, and some of my favorite, some chicken bouillon powder. Once my potatoes are nice and crispy, I'll scoop them out and toss them right into my spice bowl. While we wait for the oil to heat back up, listen to the crunch. Now, second batch of potatoes goes in. Same thing here where you spread them out to make sure nothing sticks. And then we're just repeating that exact same process all over again. To finish these off, I'll season them with a bit of salt and just give them a toss. That's the sound we're looking for. Once they're seasoned to perfection, set them aside. Don't let anyone touch those. They'll be gone if you don't keep an eye on them. My bacon is done. Like I said, this will be a little side snack with our burritos, so I'll let this cool off to the side. You know what? I'm gonna make a snack while I cook the burritos. And now we're gonna start on making our sausage. The first step being to remove the meat from its casing. So I'm simply gonna slice each of these open and peel off the outer layer. Then over in a pan over medium-high heat, I'm gonna add in some oil, just a little bit. Literally all I want here at the start is enough that it coats the very bottom of my pan. And then I'll grab my sausage, and once that pan is nice and hot, in it goes. I'm gonna break it all up now into nice small pieces and then spread it apart so that there's enough space for it to get crispy. And then we'll let this cook and develop a crust while we go to work on our vegetables. First, my red bell pepper. I'll chop it up into nice little bits like this, and then same thing with my green bell pepper. I'm mainly using different colors of these to get a nice color contrast inside my burrito. And then finally, I'll grab one red onion, which I'm gonna chop up into nice, relatively even pieces. It's sometimes a nice idea to run your knife through there one more time to make sure there's no large chunks. And then, if I see that we have nice browning on this, which it most certainly looks like we do. Not just good browning, we got really good browning on this. I'll break it apart just a little bit more to separate any of the larger chunks in here, and then in go all our veggies, along with a pinch of salt. Wow, that smells really good. This is when I feel like it's starting to smell a lot like breakfast. If you've ever been to one of those hotels where they have an omelet bar somewhere in the morning, that's what this smells like right now, but maybe just a little bit fresher. Once those vegetables are softened, add your mixture to a bowl and then set it off to the side. The next element of our burrito is the sauce. I'm gonna start by chopping up my chipotle and adobo. I'm doing this over a secondary cutting board so that I don't stain and get my main cutting board all spicy. Once these are chopped, I'll add them to my bowl along with some sour cream, a little bit of mayonnaise, a little bit of garlic powder, a tiny sprinkle of sugar for balance, and then just a little bit of lime juice, as well as a touch of lime zest, and to finish, a little pinch of salt. Mix it all up until evenly combined, and then a little taste. Finish it off with whatever you think it needs and toss it right in the fridge. The last quick step we need to do before making our tortillas is grate our cheese. And I'm gonna be using this cheddar and grating it the long way. I want those nice super long strands when I go to build my burrito. Grating it the other way is probably safer, so I would say it's probably not worth you doing it this way at home, but I'm gonna stop here so I don't risk cutting my finger, and I'm left with all these beautiful long strands of cheese. Now we'll pick this up, toss it to the side, and we'll make our tortillas. To make our tortillas, we'll grab our dough that's been resting for a little while now, and we'll hit that dough and the cutting board underneath it with just a tiny touch of flour. You'll want to use the smallest amount of flour possible while you make these. To start, I'll press down my dough similar to how I would treat pizza dough into a nice even circle. And when it looks like this, I'm gonna flour up my rolling pin just a tiny bit as well, then bring it towards me on the cutting board and roll all the way from the bottom all the way to the top, using even pressure the whole way. Then I lift, spin, and do that same exact thing on the other side. If you're going for that really perfect circle, you may need to reshape it a little bit once in a while before you roll again. But otherwise, just continue repeating this process until you have a nice thin tortilla. The goal here for our tortilla, given we're making a burrito, is to roll it to about 12 to 13 inches across. And as you can see, we're starting to get there. Once you're happy with the size of your tortilla, carefully pick it up and bring it over to your pan, in this case a comal, and toss it on. Move it into place if you don't throw it on the correct way, and then leave it be. You won't need any oil at all, just a nice sharp object so that you can pop any large bubbles that might form, which can ruin your tortilla. Once it's nice and golden brown on the first side, flip it over. You want all those nice little spots and dimples, by the way. That's how you know you made a really great tortilla dough. And once it's done, toss it off. To make sure this stays nice and soft while I cook the rest of my tortillas, I'm gonna toss it in a bag or some plastic wrap and toss it off to the side. You can be kind of rough with your tortillas, they're strong. The last step is to make our eggs. To make our scrambled eggs, we're gonna start in a bowl with a couple eggs. In this case, more than a couple eggs. Depending on how many people you're cooking for, this is a really great time to practice your one-handed egg crack. One of the things that I feel is an essential skill to have in the kitchen. Oh, I had a bowl to put the shells and I didn't. Why was I holding this bowl? Now, I'm gonna go into my eggs with some chicken bouillon powder. This is a little trick that my great-grandfather taught me, and even though he didn't cook much, he knew how to make crispy rice and delicious scrambled eggs. So to this day, anytime I make eggs, I put some of that chicken bouillon powder in there. It's basically just an umami-packed powder that has all the flavor of the base of a chicken broth. And it makes total sense because chicken, eggs, but it's also undeniably delicious. Whisk until you feel the yolks and the whites are fully and evenly combined. Then jump on over to your pan and add in a little bit of butter. Because we're making gentle scrambled eggs, notice that my pan is not ripping hot right now. Think about it this way. If you want soft and fluffy eggs, you gotta cook them in a soft and fluffy way. Once you start to see and hear that slight sizzle, go ahead and pour in those eggs. And now I'm just gonna go in with a few more little bits of butter sprinkled all throughout the top of my egg. Honestly, I don't know if this does anything. It's just a creative way for me to sneak in more butter. And then I'm gonna slowly mix. I almost want my scrambled eggs to look like a crumbled up curtain. When they look all silky like that, they're gonna taste all silky like that. You see how gently I just cooked those? I barely even had to touch them. And now, by the time we're ready to assemble our burrito, this will be done and ready. I'm just gonna finish it off with a little bit of salt. I always like to put the salt at the end with eggs. Then I'll turn off the heat and move this over and we can assemble. To assemble, I'll grab one of my tortillas. Part of the reason we kept it in this bag is so it stayed nice and steamy and it's not gonna crack when we fold it. And I'm gonna start by adding in about 2 eggs worth of scrambled eggs. And then right on top of that, some of my cheese, since immediately that hot egg should start to melt some of that cheese. Then I'm gonna keep snacking on some of my bacon while I add on some of my crispy potatoes. You'll taste that crunch later when you go to eat this. I'll add on my avocado. And on top of that, some of my meat. Oh, I feel so bad ruining that avocado. And then to roll, I'll fold in both of the sides and then I'll push in the bottom. Then in one swift motion, I'm gonna roll the whole burrito right over the top of itself. As a last step to seal the whole burrito up, I'm gonna sneak just a little bit of cheese inside here to act like a glue once we seal it on a pan. And then I'll carefully transfer this over to a pan with a tiny bit of oil on the bottom. You can use butter if you want to. And once that oil is nice and hot, in we go. This is a very important step because we're sealing our burrito. To be super sure that my cheese gets nice and melty, I'm gonna toss on a lid just for a little bit. This step here will also steam our tortilla to make it softer and chewier, which is a texture that I love in a burrito. After a couple of minutes, check on your burrito to see how it's doing. I'm looking for the whole thing to be nice and warm when I touch it, and I'm also looking for a beautiful golden brown crust and seal on the bottom. In addition to a seal, that's an added layer of texture. I'm gonna lay it down real quick on a baking sheet lined with paper towel to drain off any extra oil. To cut it open and not have everything spill all over the place, I'm gonna wrap it up in parchment paper. This helps to keep a little bit of tension when you cut it. And now, the moment of truth. Ta-da! Oh, and don't forget about your sauce. That's my baby right there. They grow up so fast.